Hi there, friends. This video you're about to watch is a companion video for Shaping Fire Episode 110 with special guest Ethan Russo, all about the scientific aspects of Delta-8 THC. I figured it was kind of hard to focus only on the medicinal aspects of Delta-8 THC when there is so much discussion about the legal aspects of whether or not Delta-8 THC is actually legal from the US Farm Bill or not. And I'm not a legal expert, so I went and I got you one. We're very happy that Credo Science had a webinar last week that included a section on the legality of Delta-8. And their guest, attorney Lauren Rudick, has graciously offered her part of the webinar to you so that you can check it out. At the time, this was a paid webinar, and so they're willing to pull out this little piece for you so that you can get a really good, solid understanding of the legality or illegality of Delta-8 THC. So thank you to Credo Science, and especially thank you for attorney Lauren Rudick for sharing this piece with us. I hope you enjoy it.
Lauren began her career in litigation, spent a decade litigating a wide variety of cases, and after her mom used cannabis to address terminal illness, Lauren became a cannabis advocate, and from there has pioneered one of the most successful practices dedicated to the cannabis industry. She is a contributor to Marijuana Ventures magazine and serves in leadership positions in a wide variety of cannabis associations around the country. And she serves clients in many states and has been a driving force in legalization in the state of New York. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Ethan and Nisha. I'm so happy to be here and to, share a stage with you. I guess we're going back to when Ethan and I first met in 2019. I had the opportunity to be his moderator at the Emerald Cup, and it's been a tremendous working collaboration since then. So very happy to be here and, excited to discuss all matters D8, legal matters. Okay. Julie, do you want to
share the screen? There we go.
Great. Okay. All right, so as Ethan described in far greater detail and using actual science, D8 is a psychoactive intoxicating cannabinoid that occurs naturally in cannabis plants, including cannabis that meets the definition of hemp, and we'll get into that in a little bit, albeit in very small quantities. As most of you probably know, distribution of medical and adult use cannabis is supposed to be limited to intrastate activity, meaning no interstate commerce, and sold strictly in medical or adult use retail dispensaries. Yet Delta-8 can be found almost anywhere. You can order it through the mail, you can purchase it at a local wellness store, even at gas stations or big chain grocers. So probably wondering how that's possible. And it's because most D8 does come from hemp, and hemp is federally legal, right? So I really wish it was that simple. Go on to the next slide, Julie, please. Okay. Okay, so as of today, there is virtually no consistency in application or enforcement between federal and state law or between and among the various states regarding hemp-derived cannabinoids, including and especially Delta-8. As I'll explain in a bit, there does seem to be some legal precedent providing stability in this area, literally evolving in real time, a case decided just last week or the week before. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, I want to take a quick step back to give you a very basic understanding of the legal framework of hemp under the 2018 Farm Bill. So the 2018 Farm Bill defined hemp to include all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers with a Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentration of not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. So they're really referring to hemp biomass or floral material when they talk about that dry weight basis. Hemp, if it meets this definition, is excluded from the definition of marijuana, which is classified as a Schedule I substance under the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Yet THC, including those naturally occurring in the cannabis plant, as well as their synthetic equivalents, were made controlled Schedule I substances. So right away, we have this immediate tension and conflict with respect to hemp-derived THC, and the courts and the DAA are publicly grappling with this issue. Most Delta-8 on the market, as Ethan noted, is not naturally occurring. Rather, most D8 on the market has been converted or synthesized from CBD. And this is critical because while the DEA consistently maintains that cannabinoids, which naturally derive from hemp, are hemp and are thus exempted from the CSA, the DEA feels very differently about cannabinoids that have been synthesized or chemically treated. Go on to the next slide. Okay, so the DEA has taken, a pretty strong position on the matter. According to the DEA, the synthesizing process renders this otherwise legal substance illegal. In mid-August of 2020, the DEA promulgated an interim final rule, which purports to classify as a Schedule 1 substance all synthetic tetrahydrocannabinols. So this includes THC, THCV, THCA, and Delta-8. In various letters and correspondence issued by the DEA in 2021 regarding hemp programs in Alabama and Florida, DEA maintained that synthetic cannabinoids, including hemp-derived Delta-8 that was converted from CBD, is illegal under the CSA, yet hemp-derived THC that met the D9 concentration, 0.3% total THC or less, are not. So now looking at some of the final finished products, not just the floral material or the biomass. And then most recently, while indicating that new rules are coming, in February of 2023, DEA reiterated that Delta-8 that has been converted from CBD is in fact a controlled substance. So following the DEA's line of reasoning, if the DE8 naturally occurs in hemp and that hemp was grown in a 2018 Farm Bill state, the legal inquiry can stop as naturally occurring cannabinoids are clearly exempt from the CSA pursuant to the 2018 Farm Bill. But if the D8 has been converted from CBD, the legal status is far less clear. And then anyone who's considering distributing Delta-8, of course, is going to turn on your appetite for risk. So now I want to talk a little bit about state laws. If you could go to the next slide, great. So even after resolving this matter from a federal perspective, we have to now turn to state law. And as with everything involving cannabis, state laws differ on how to treat D8. And until very recently, the trend was for states to come down very hard on Delta-8. So legal status really does vary from gray to outright illegal. Some states which had not yet operated under the 2018 Farm Bill have not updated their definitions of hemp to include isomers, derivatives, extracts, and or cannabinoids. So Delta-8 very unclear as to the legal status in those states. Other states deem any form of THC a controlled substance. Some states, such as in New York, regulate D8 specifically. Many states simply follow the FDA, particularly when it comes to the inclusion of cannabinoids, including hemp-derived cannabinoids in food and beverage products. And we know the FDA follows the DEA, so a little bit of a circular argument there. And still, no analysis of hemp-derived cannabinoids would be complete without considering the Federal Analog Act of 1986. D8 could be considered an analog because it shares structures similar to Schedule I drugs, or because the actual intended effect is substantially similar to, or in some instances greater than a Schedule I drug. Lots of basis to consider whether Delta-8 should be regulated like THC. If you're sufficiently confused, it's okay. So are most legal experts. All of this confusion was sure to spark lawsuits, and the wave has certainly decidedly begun. So multiple states, including New York, Arkansas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Oregon, have passed laws that restrict or otherwise render illegal production and sale of Delta-8 products, of Delta-8 generally, and products that contain Delta-8. And the lawsuits have begun to try to take those laws down. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Okay, so perhaps our federal court system will resolve this tension, starting with a decision earlier this month. The case is styled Biogen versus Sanders. It was brought in federal court in the Eastern District of Arkansas. The plaintiffs were Biogen of LLC of Fayetteville, Drippers Vape Shop of Greenbrier, the Cigarette Store of Colorado doing business as Smoker Friendly, and Sky Marketing Corp of Texas doing business as Hometown Hero. This was a big win because what the plaintiffs ultimately did was preclude enforcement of this law on the night before the law was supposed to take effect. So it was a very big legal deal. This lawsuit named the governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the attorney general of the state, the directors of the Arkansas Department of Finance and Admin, the Tobacco Control Board, the State Department of Agriculture, the State Plant Board, and the 28 prosecuting attorneys of the state as defendants. So they named everybody who has any impact or any finger on the pulse of the enforcement and administration of this law in Arkansas. The plaintiff sought an injunction prohibiting enforcement of this bill. The bill criminalized all hemp products produced as a result of synthetic chemical process and any other psychoactive substance that was derived therefrom. The plaintiffs did argue that the act was preempted by the 2018 Farm Bill and that the act's provisions were unconstitutionally vague and ambiguous. And the court agreed and entered an injunction barring the state from enforcing the act. In its ruling, the court made a series of pronouncements, which they do apply only to the law in Arkansas, but they could nonetheless establish a precedent upon which all similar prohibitive state programs could be invalidated. So to this end, the court ruled that the act is preempted by federal law, a concept known as conflict preemption, because Arkansas has already joined the 2018 Farm Bill, and the 2018 Farm Bill does not limit its application to method by which derivatives, extracts, and cannabinoids are produced, as long as the downstream products result from plants that contain less than 0.3% THC, they are legal hemp. Very important here, the state did reject any notion of testing based upon a post-decarboxylation method. This is something that has been proffered by various states and the DEA, as this reads qualifiers into the definition of hemp beyond that was what was intended by the 2018 Farm Bill. The court also found that the act was preempted by federal law on a concept known as express preemption. So although states are in fact allowed to regulate the production, growing, and cultivation of hemp more strictly than federal law, they cannot restrict interstate commerce of hemp products, including hemp-derived products, if those products derive from lawful hemp. So here the act in Arkansas would have precluded commerce of hemp-derived Delta-8 products that were lawfully produced in other states. And then the court found that the act was vague and thus void. Laws can be very ill-conceived, but the court found that the act contained terms that would confuse even an exceptionally intelligent reader. To this end, the act contained terms like continuous transportation, synthetic substances, psychoactive substance, none of which were actually defined in the statute. The act also made references to dangers of misuse, risks to the public, all of which are highly subjective. So this was hardly a basis upon which the court felt wielding criminal sanctions or criminal penalties was appropriate. We can go on to the next slide. So still thinking about distributing D8, maybe? If you're thinking about a distribution strategy that involves Delta-8 and you want to mitigate legal exposure, know the science. Make sure you really want to spend your resources on a product that, as Ethan said, likely only exists owing to federal illegality of cannabis. You definitely want to retain an attorney who is expert and fluent in hemp regulation. These laws are changing on a weekly, sometimes daily basis. Analysis that we've done in one state a month ago, likely to be stale. So you really got to keep up with the regulations as they change. And don't just rely on your lawyers. You have to become an expert in all matters hemp. We're expecting a new iteration of the Farm Bill this year. This could resolve all outstanding matters regarding intoxicating cannabinoids, regardless of their hemp-derived or cannabis-derived. So you got to be your own expert. You have to retain attorneys and you have to have an ongoing dialogue because any distribution strategy has to be very flexible and adaptable. We would recommend maintaining low production runs, given how quickly the regulatory landscape changes in this area. We would recommend strong representations and warranties in written contracts. Where was the hemp grown? How the products were produced? How to shift the risk of regulatory compliance? What happens if somebody gets hurt? And then be sure to seek indemnification because, of course, representations and warranties are very little if you don't have legal recourse to enforce them. So those are my practice pointers to the extent that anyone is interested in engaging in the D8 space, even after hearing Ethan's presentation and knowing that there are really far superior products out there. So thank you for staying with me. I know the science is far sexier than the legal technicalities. And ultimately, while this legal exercise is somewhat thrilling for us lawyers, we do continue to strive for consistency in application. We're looking for clear rules that are easy to follow, that are rooted in actual science, of course, not racial animosity or any desire to suppress political speech, which is how cannabis wound up on the Controlled Substances Act in the first instance. So ultimately, we just really need to stay on top of Delta-8, the distribution of Delta-8, and decide for ourselves whether this is, a cannabinoid and product that we want to continue promoting as we see further liberalization of cannabis generally. And that's it.